Welcome to the latest episode of the Real World Nutrition Podcast. This is episode 202, Superfoods, Clean Eating, and Why Labels Don't Help. Welcome back to the Real World Nutrition Podcast. Today, I'm talking about two of the most overused, overhyped phrases in the nutrition sphere. And this is superfoods and clean eating. And these terms do sound positive. They may make you think of health, longevity, maybe a bit of moral superiority. When you put that kale salad in your cart or you share that you had kale in your smoothie. But here's the thing. Neither term actually has a clear, science-based definition. And when we give too much weight to these terms, we start heading down a road of guilt, potential confusion, and even fear about food. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So we're going to start with superfoods first and what that word really means, how it started, and why it can be more marketing than reality. And then I'll move to clean eating, a phrase that means something different to everyone and yet somehow still makes people think they're not doing enough. But both of these topics are tied to a bigger issue. The way we label food, the way we label how we eat, and the way those labels influence how we see ourselves and our choices. So this past week, as I do often, I wrote a couple of blogs on each of these topics. So I do have these linked in the show notes, so it has more information than what I'm covering here. So if you want to take a look at more of the specifics, you can go there, but here you get to hear it in my voice, in me sharing what I have talked about in the past with regard to both of these terms and what it means in the bigger picture of things. So first up, let's talk about the superfoods story. So this term superfoods is not really a nutrition science term. So you're not really finding it in the textbooks, the nutrition textbooks. The USDA doesn't have a chart that designates which foods are super. It's a marketing term that caught on because it's catchy, it's easy to sell, and I will say this was something that came up in a book back in the early 2000s. And so this popularity of this term came up back then. And this is when we were talking about foods like blueberries and salmon and kale being promoted as these foods that you must have for optimal health. And these superfoods, I want to say, while there are plenty of foods out there that offer great health benefits, to label some as superior to others isn't quite how we should do things. So when I use the term superfoods, I don't usually use the term. I have in the past, but this is really often referring to foods that provide more than just calories. They provide vitamins and minerals and other things that have great health benefits. And since this came up 20, 25 years ago, more or less, there's foods that come and go off of this so-called list. Things that include foods like acai berries, chia seeds, matcha, and quinoa. And these foods haven't changed in their health benefits. They just change in what is trendy and their popularity. And here's the thing though, none of these foods are bad. And of course, many of them are great sources of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. The thing that becomes potentially problematic is when we think these foods are superior and have some kind of magical properties to them. So for example, when the acai started becoming very, very popular, It pushed out other things, and everything was acai this, acai that. This juice, it has this pill, it's all these things. And in the big picture, all I said was, it's really just a South American blueberry. So that doesn't mean they're not literally South American blueberries, but it's like how blueberries have a lot of great properties. The acai has a lot of great properties as well. Not better, not worse, but not better than blueberries. But people had this idea that not only were these things magical, it was also being promoted as something that helped with weight loss. And that's never what the claims were, but it got co-opted into being not just a superfood, but something that was so super, it somehow helped with weight loss when it didn't. And while I'm picking on the acai right now, just think about all these different foods that tend to come and go. So the chia, great things to have in our diet. Excellent. Full of fiber, omega-3s, great foods. But it's not magical. There's nothing special that will happen just because we include it. Same with turmeric, or like I mentioned, matcha. That's very popular right now. Great benefits, but nothing magical about it. Because as I've said it before, I'll say it again, there's no single food that can make or break your health. So having blueberries, which are excellent foods, there's a lot of health benefits to blueberries. But eating blueberries isn't going to undo a pattern of not getting enough sleep, not moving your body, or eating an unbalanced diet overall. And that may seem obvious to some people, but when people have used some of these superfoods in the past, it's like they exclude other foods and focus on just these so-called superfoods. So, like, for example, quinoa or kale. Quinoa is a great source of protein for a grain, but it's not anything that's going to be a ticket to perfect health. Kale, whatever got the marketing to that, I still think that kale belongs as a garnish in salad bars, and we don't even have salad bars much anymore. But it's not anything super special compared to spinach. But sometimes these foods, when they get this label as a superfood, that often means premium pricing can come with it. And sometimes that premium pricing can be dramatic. So for example, a bag of regular spinach will cost you a fraction of what the baby super greens might be priced at, even though nutritionally, not just from calories, but all the other beneficial nutrients in them are extremely similar. And some of these so-called superfoods do come with premium pricing in ridiculous amounts. So years back, I remember, I think somebody shared it to me because I don't go into the store very often, but Whole Foods was selling bottles of water with 3 asparagus spears in it. 3 asparagus spears in a bottle of water and selling it for some ridiculous price, like $5, which now doesn't sound like that much, but it was water with 3 asparagus spears. You could have bought a whole bunch of asparagus for that price. And so this idea that it was somehow super or magical weight loss or something really dupes people into thinking that something's worth paying for. So here's the thing, is yes, these foods have great health benefits. If you like them, eat them. So when somebody calls something a superfood, it really is probably just a food that is good for us. So things like oats, things like salmon, things like nuts, things like beans, these are great foods for us. And they have had the label of superfoods. But that doesn't mean anything special. I just tell people, hey, eat beans, eat nuts because they're good for you. They're great sources of protein. They've got fiber. But I don't throw them out there and refer to them as a superfood. Because if you see this thing, you see this list of these top superfoods, Sure, somebody threw it together, but I could probably list 20, 25 foods, actually I did in the blog, of foods that have these excellent properties that we should eat on a regular basis, from the fatty fish to the yogurt to the beans to the oats, all kinds of things. But let's stop calling them superfoods and just eat them as a variety of foods in our overall healthy diet. And let's not make this anything that's so superior that it stretches your budget to include something that's an exotic thing like goji berries, when it's really just a different sounding food that has health benefits like many of the foods that we get in our own country without having to pay extra for it. So next up, I want to address this term clean eating and what I refer to as the problem with clean eating. So at first glance, this one sounds great. It sounds appealing. It's probably used more than superfoods these days. And who wouldn't want to eat clean? But here's the problem with this, the trouble with this, is that this term is vague. In your mind, you might have an exact idea what this means. But it means wildly different things to different people. So often I have to clarify when somebody says they eat clean or they're doing clean eating, what does that mean to you? What does it mean? For some people, clean eating means avoiding processed foods. For others, it's cutting out added sugars. Some people define it as eating organic. Others see it as plant-based. Then there's others who say it means no dairy, no gluten, no alcohol, no caffeine, no fun, and not so much no fun because it's their lifestyle. They choose it. But I often think when there's this long list of no related to foods, lighten up. But the bigger issue here is that if there's clean eating, what does that imply to people who don't call their way they eat as clean eating? That implies this dirty eating. I've never, ever, ever referred to how I eat as clean eating. I generally don't refer to how I eat with any type of label unless specifically asked, and then say, well, it slants a little bit more towards flexitarian or more Mediterranean or more DASH, but I don't like to label how one eats. Because if it's labeled, then there's this moral value on food choices. And then if somebody sees me eating a cupcake or a slice of pizza, they're like, well, how dare you refer to the fact that you eat Mediterranean style when really, come on, it's just eating. So this moral value that people attach to food choices becomes where I'm better than you or that's bad. And by extension, people tend to feel like they're bad for eating it. And that's not how food should work. In the past, somebody mentioned, I was talking about when I had deep dish pizza in Chicago, and somebody actually said to me, "You eat pizza?" I don't know what that was all about. That happens all the time, though. So that, again, is not how food should work. So adding to this, when someone says they eat clean, they may be trying to share their personal approach, how they are deciding to eat. But if you're on the receiving end, it can feel like a judgment of your choices, even if it isn't intended that way. And often, because of my profession, as an instructor, as a dietitian, as somebody who people assume has judgment in how people eat, which I don't, but it feels to me, I should say, that they are so proud that they eat clean and bragging to me that they eat clean, bragging to me that they only have one cheat meal a week. But this is the thing is, I'm not usually too sensitive to how people talk about what they're eating or when we're in a mixed group, what people's choices are, unless they are telling me specifically how they're doing it. Where people are talking about how they're detoxing or they're fasting or they're cutting carbs or they stopped eating gluten because they think it has a health benefit beyond what the sensitivity or intolerance is. And people have told me they're cutting carbs while I order a plate of pasta. And whether people are thinking something or not, I don't know. But I don't care. I don't like the labeling. I don't feel that people should. Now, if they want to feel proud of themselves, great. But when there's this air of judgment or feel proud of me for cutting carbs, that's where this becomes potentially problematic. And here's the thing with clean eating. There is no universal definition of clean eating. And you may say, well, yeah, there is. Well, what's the universal definition of eating or having a vegetarian approach to eating? What's the universal definition there? There isn't one. In your mind, you may have a definite idea of what vegetarian means, but when it comes down to it, it varies whether somebody eats eggs, whether somebody eats dairy, whether somebody even eats fish. So again, clean eating is fluid in a lot of ways and no universal definition. So that's why it's easy for the phrase to be co-opted into fad diets, restrictive plans, and unfortunately, disordered eating patterns. So I've had people who think say they're clean eating, and then they have one food, or I should say one meal, where they don't define it as clean. And then they have to detox. They feel they have to detox. And that's not how it works. That's not how our bodies need to be. So let me get to this last part here, the bigger picture. Food without labels. Patterns of eating without giving a name to it. So here's what it all comes down to. Labeling foods and labeling eating patterns this way creates this hierarchy that isn't useful or accurate. So like I said, when I'm backed into a corner and asked specifically how I eat, I try to put a label on it, but I don't like to. I don't want to because I don't eat entirely Mediterranean style. I don't take a long time to eat. I don't sit back and eat slowly and socialize and buy fresh foods a few times a week. I do have meat more often than the true Mediterranean approach. So that's why I don't like to label it. So here's the thing. Superfoods aren't magic. Clean food isn't superior. You don't need to label your plate to be healthy. Anybody who knows me knows I eat what I say is like a normal person. Whatever that means. There's not restrictions. There's not things that are off limits. I don't label things as bad. And you definitely don't need to feel guilt or shame for eating something outside of these so-called ideal categories. If your approach to eating has a list of things that you can't have, not because you have sensitivities to them or you have an allergy to them, but things you can't have because there's this perception that they're bad. That's where things tend to be problematic. And yeah, if you like kale salad, great. If you like putting spinach in your smoothie, okay. People swear they do it and you can't taste it. I call BS on that. I have smoothies all the time. I have lots of stuff in there. Spinach doesn't go in there, but that's my approach. But to think it's so much better isn't necessarily true. And here's the thing. It's also okay to enjoy a cupcake, enjoy a burger that's not on a whole grain bun, enjoy a cocktail without overthinking it. And I don't choose a cocktail because it's low in sugar. I choose a cocktail because I like it. Health and eating is about our patterns over time. Not individual meals, not snacks, not even a weekend of going off the rails. It's a pattern over time. So instead of chasing these latest must-have foods, what is in? I've heard on the news last week that people just can't keep matcha powder in stock. It's hard to get a hold of right now. Like, people back off. So instead of chasing these must-have things or trying to match someone else's version of clean eating, focus on what works for you. And that might mean getting a mix of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, protein, and fats most days. Actually, hopefully that's what it means. It might also mean giving yourself permission to enjoy dessert without labeling it as cheating or being bad or, oh my gosh, I need to detox, I shouldn't be doing this. I know mindset doesn't switch on and off overnight. So I just want to keep reiterating this. There's nothing inherently good or bad about eating a single food. One thing's not going to break you. One thing's not going to fix you. So if you take one thing from today's episode, let it be this. You don't need to eat so-called superfoods to be healthy. But blueberries are amazing. So are oats, so is yogurt. But anyway, you don't need to eat these superfoods to be healthy. And you don't need to eat clean to be worthy of whatever that might mean. And the more we can step away from these labels, the more freedom we can have to enjoy food for what it is. That fuel, that nourishment, and even just pure enjoyment. All right, everyone. As I mentioned, the links to both of the blogs related to this, the Superfoods and Clean Eating, are linked in the show notes if you want to read more about this. If you do want to talk more about how to break free from these labels and feel confident in your food choices without feeling guilt, I encourage you to schedule one of those complimentary introductory calls with me, and we can talk about how we can work together on this. The link is always in the show notes on that. And with that, you all have a great week. You take care, and bye for now.